Hello everybody. Today we're going to be looking at Chapter 3, the chapter on language and meaning. So we want to talk about two components of language. In this presentation we're going to be talking about verbal communication, and in the second component we will be talking about nonverbal communication. Verbal communication is covered in Chapter 3 on language and meaning. So we begin with the definition of language. Language is a collection of symbols, letters, or words with arbitrary meaning that are governed by rules and used to communicate. Language consists of words, symbols that represent things without being those things themselves. What that means, and we mean by the word arbitrary, basically is that a word represents something, represents an object. It's the code that represents the significant. It is not the significant thing itself. It has an arbitrary meaning. So there is no direct connection between the word dog and the animal dog. It is simply arbitrary. It's the way the meaning word has come to mean. When we talk about language, we also talk about the functions of language. And there are several functions listed in your text. The first is instrumental function. The instrumental function of language is used to get something that is needed or wanted. Regulatory function of language is used to control behavior of others. Informative language is used to provide or get information to others or from others. Persuasive function of language is to change the attitudes, the thinking, or the behaviors of others. Language is also used to deceive. So we may use language to deliver information that is untrue with the intention of deceiving somebody else. Language also has a relational function. We use language to establish, define, and maintain relationships with other people. We also use language for small talk. This is scripted and superficial conversation based on social conventions. So to recap, language is symbolic. It's a symbol that stands for something else. And the second thing that we want to mention once again is language is arbitrary. There is no direct connection between the sign, the word, and the thing that is signified by that word. So when we're talking about language, we need to point out that language has rules. And so I'm going to be covering some of the basic rules of language here. This first part on phonology and morphology is not in your textbook, so you'll want to make some notes. I will also be posting some other videos on Canvas or on Moodle that help you learn these things. So the first thing we want to mention is phonology. And what is phonology? Phonology deals with the level of sound. Oops. So this is the level of sound. This is where language has no meaning. We're just talking about the sounds themselves. And those units of sounds are referred to as phonemes. So you think of the sounds like ba, pa, da, ta, hua. Those are all phonemes. They have no meaning. They're sounds that we use to create words. So what are some of the ways in which we understand phonology and we understand phonemes? There are three basic things that we need to look at. The first is manner of articulation. The second is place of articulation. And the third is called voicing. So if you take, for example, two sounds, the ba and the pa sound. If you'll notice, when you make those sounds, ba and pa, they are made in the same way. They have the same manner of articulation. In order to make a ba or a pa, you have to put your lips together to block sound and then release sound. I'm sorry, to block air and then to release air. So ba and pa are the same. So we call those labials. The second is, or manner of articulation, are called a stop. They stop the flow of air in the nasal and vocal passages. The second thing is place of articulation. Where is the sound created? Where is the sound made? For ba and pa, they're both made with the lips, or they're called labials. But what makes the difference between if ba and pa have the same manner of articulation and same place of articulation, what causes them to be two different sounds? And that's where the word voicing comes in. Voicing refers to the vocal flaps that are in your throat, in your larynx. When those vocal folds are halfway closed, it causes the air coming through your larynx causes those folds to vibrate. That's called voicing. When those folds are all the way open, there's no vibration, and so that's called voiceless. So if you put your index finger on your throat and you do ba and you do pa, you'll notice with ba there is a little bit of vibration. With pa, however, there is no vibration. And that's because of the vocal folds. So ba is voiced, while pa is voiceless. So those are the basic areas of phonology, the basic study of phonology. And phonology defines or helps define how sounds act in particular parts of the word. For example, the letters WH, hua, are different depending upon where they follow in a word. And so those deal also with the rules of phonology. The second level of language is called morphology. And morphology is the study of words and how they are formed and their relationship with other words. And so when we talk about morphology, we talk about stems of words, we talk about roots, prefixes, suffixes. All those are part of the study of morphology. And there are two classifications of words. The first classification are content words. Content words are nouns, verbs, adverbs, adjectives. Those are all words that have meaning. Function words are words such as prepositions or pronouns which have a function in a language. The difference is that content words is an open category. We are continually adding new words to our English lexicon. Function words are a closed category. Those are the words that continue to stay put. The next thing is a morpheme. A morpheme is a meaningful morphological unit of a language that it cannot be further divided. So for example, in the example on the screen, incoming forms the word incoming. And you'll see it has three parts. In, the prefix in, the suffix, the root or base of the word come, and the ing, the suffix, forms the morpheme of incoming. Now that's a morpheme because it can't be broken down. If you took off the in or the ing off of that word, then it changes the meaning of the word itself. Very similar to the word income. Income has a very specific meaning, therefore it is a morpheme. So when we talk about morphemes, we talk about free morphemes and we talk about bound morphemes. Free morphemes are those units of sound that have meaning. So, for example, the word car, the word come, the word ball, the word cat, the word dog. Those are all morphemes, or all free morphemes, because they can stand alone and they have meaning in and of themselves. The second type of morpheme are bound morphemes, and these are affixes such as prefixes or suffixes. So, for example, using the example above, income, the in is a prefix, and it has, in order for that idea to have meaning, it has to attach itself to a word. Bound roots are roots that have no meaning in and of themselves, but must attach themselves to something else in order to have meaning. One of the examples that is given is the word, the root C-I-E-V-E, from the word receive. There is no such thing in the English language as sieve, so in order for that root to have meaning, we have to add the prefix receive, or the prefix deceive, or the prefix d as in deceive. So those are the basic morphemes. The other kind of roots we have, the other kind of rules that we have deals with semantics, syntax, and pragmatics. Semantic rules define the meaning of a specific word, referring to how that word, the way that speakers of the language respond to that word. So, for example, the word yellow or yoga, yes or young, they all have a certain meaning in the word. So this is where language then has its meaning. And we'll get back to the meaning in a moment. The next level is syntax, and that's how sentences are formed. How do we arrange our words in the English language? Our common pattern is subject, verb, and then some kind of phrase after that. And syntax governs how we put words together in order to form sentences in order to make sense. The next kind of rule are pragmatics. Pragmatics deals with the social practice of a language. And what's really important here with pragmatics is the practice of cooperation. So we have to understand, we have to have a certain understanding within a culture, within a society, on what words mean and how we use language in order to communicate clearly and effectively. So the rules we just looked at help us to organize and classify reality, to classify our language. As we said earlier, language is arbitrary, but nonetheless we do affix definitions to the language that we use. And as such, there are two types of meaning. There's denotative meaning and there's connotative meaning. Denotative meaning refers to the lexical or the dictionary meaning of a term, while connotative meaning is the meaning that a particular group or subgroup of culture give to the meaning of a word. And as we said about arbitrary, this is also abstract in certain respects. One of the things we should keep in mind as we use language is to remember the difference between abstract terms and concrete terms. So here in this graphic, which is also found in your text, you have at the top of the ladder, you have abstract. And you'll notice there that the abstract is a living creature, live, like all plants and animals. A very abstract term. At the bottom of the ladder, you'll see concrete. Bradley, a pug, Old English sheep dog. And so to use concrete language is to use language that is much more specific and much more applicable to what you're trying to say. So for example, if I were to say, bring your book to class tomorrow, you wouldn't know which book I wanted you to bring. But if I said, bring your communication textbook, that would be using concrete language. So it's important that we realize that and we try to use concrete language in our day-to-day use. All right, what are some language things that you should avoid? Well, the first one is grammatical errors. Grammatical errors occur quite a lot, especially amongst our friends and our acquaintances. One of the ones that I often hear common is the use of a statement as a question. I can go to the store instead of may I go to the store as a question. So those are grammatical errors that we oftentimes have in our English language. Not using proper pronouns with the correct number of pronouns. The old English rules about the uses of conjunctions, my friend and I are going to the store instead of my friend and me, or me and my friend. Those are grammatical errors, and to become more efficient users of the language, we should avoid those as much as possible. Another thing we should also avoid is the use of slang. Slang is an informal, casual language used among equals with words typically unsuitable for more formal context. And again, one of the things I like to talk about are Cajun slang terms that we may oftentimes use in our daily English. The next one is cliches. Cliches are phrases or sayings that have worn out their usefulness. So for example, it's all in a day's work is a cliche. And sometimes we revert to those a lot. One more I would add to this list at least is the use of sarcasm. Sarcasm, as many of you know, are statements that really don't have the meaning that they may convey. And sarcasm is dependent upon nonverbal cues more than verbal cues. And so people have to be able to interpret and understand those cues. Avoiding the use of euphemisms. Euphemisms are pleasant sounding terms that are used for less than pleasant sounding experiences. For example, you see here in the picture, you see a physician and a patient in a hospital bed. The physician may say, well, tomorrow you're going to have a procedure, as opposed to tomorrow you're going to have open heart surgery. It sounds different. It sounds a little better when you call it a procedure than when you use the word surgery. We should also avoid the use of profanity. I don't really think I need to go into that. Profanity are words that are not socially acceptable among people or socially questionable, so we should avoid those if we can. The next is the use of the word of jargon. Jargon is terms or language that is used in connection with a certain profession, a certain occupation. It's important to avoid regionalisms. Regionalisms are terms that deal with a certain region or a certain part of the country. We should avoid gender-biased language, racist language, heterosexist language, and ageist language. And again, those terms and definitions are all found in your textbook. So how do we go about improving our language skills? Well, one way in that we could improve our language skills are by using descriptives. Descriptiveness is the practice of describing observed behavior or phenomena instead of offering personal reactions, or judgments. You can be descriptive in different ways: by checking your perceptions, by paraphrasing, and by using operational definitions. Checking your perceptions. Did you see or understand something that you experienced? So you want to make sure that you check your perception. You ask the question, did I understand you to mean this? Which involves the use of paraphrasing. Using operational definitions, it gives a specific meaning or understanding to a comment. So for example, the example that's given in your textbook is professor says the only excused absence is that for illness, and then he defines exactly, or illness is defined exactly as what is meant by that term. And so that's using definite terms or defined terms using operational definitions. Use concrete language. And again, going back to the ladder that we used earlier as from abstract to concrete, a couple of other things that are mentioned in the text are dating and indexing. Dating is giving a specific time or place of an observation. I saw this happen yesterday or last week. Indexing is putting that in a proper perspective. And so it's important that we differentiate between observations and inferences. All right, that covers the basics of this chapter. We will be moving on to nonverbal communication in our next presentation.